Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the A&A Numismatic Theater. This afternoon, we're very happy to have Hal Dunn, who's going to be discussing remembering the people from the Carson City Mint. Hal?
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming, including my official heckler, Fred Holleberg, sitting down front here. What we're going to talk about today is not the conventional sort of thing when we think of statistics of coin production and how many maybe have survived over the years. What we're going to talk about is the people, in most part, people who were there. We'll start off very briefly about the development of Western Nevada and Carson City. Eagle Valley in Carson County, Utah Territory came into existence in 1851 when the first settlers arrived there. It was the third post office in what became Nevada, the state of Nevada, when a post office was created November 18th, 1858. 15 miles distant on the Comstock lode, the discovery of silver was made in 1859, and Virginia City becomes the Queen City of the Comstock. Later, the mines helped finance the Civil War. Nevada Territory was created on March 2nd, 1861. And less than a year, or just over a year later, June 2nd, 1862, the House of Representatives inquires of Salmon P. Chase, then Secretary of the Treasury, if it would be in the public interest to establish a mint in the territory of Nevada. James Pollock, the director of the mint, is opposed. On March 3rd, 1863, the act to establish the branch mint at Carson City is passed, a mere 2 years and 1 day after the establishment of the Nevada Territory. Secretary Chase requests that Hiram Pitt Bennett, the delegate from Colorado Territory, visit Carson City and study the situation there. In February 1865, a block facing Carson Street is purchased by the federal government. And on November 27, 1865, Secretary of the Treasury Hugh McCulloch appointed Abraham Curry and Henry F. Rice and John H. Mills commissioners to establish the mint. On July 18, 1866, ground is broken at 600 North Carson Street. 1 day after the building plans have arrived from Washington, D.C., Abraham Curry is now the contractor to build the mint. September 24, 1866, the cornerstone is laid, and construction drags on for over 3 years. Curry travels to Washington to keep the project going, and some Treasury Department officials and members of Congress want to abandon the mint project. On December 13, 1869, the building is completed. Abraham Van Stanford Curry. He was the father of Carson City, and he's the father of the mint. He was the first superintendent, appointed in 1869. He was born in 1815 in New York and raised there. Migrated to California in either 1854 or 1855, and in July of 1858, he arrives in western Utah Territory in what is now the state of Nevada. As the owner of the Gould and Curry mine on the Comstock lode, he establishes a mine that's very, very famous in the history of the West, and certainly in the history of Nevada. He's engaged in the construction business and the owner of 2 hotels, including the Warm Springs Hotel just east of Carson City. He's a member of the territorial legislature from Ormsby County in 1862 in the House of Representatives and the Upper House, which was called the Council, in 1864. He is also the first warden of the territorial prison. He's the commissioner to establish, or one of the commissioners to establish the mint, and he's the builder of the mint between 1866 and 69. When the mint was completed, it opened for business on January 6, 1870, and bullion was received that day, but there were no coin dies to strike coins. The first coins were actually struck on February 11, 1870. 2,303 Liberty-seated dollars were struck. It is unknown whether Curry struck the first coin, which was sent to President Grant. Some CC dollars are known with proof-like services and may have been struck on February 11th. Wimmer Wright, who is a collector from New York, has a magnificent piece that has been illustrated a number of times that has proof-like qualities. At the mint at the time that was brought out by Curry was a gentleman by the name of William Uncle Billy Lynch. He'd been the servant of Abraham Lincoln and later of Andrew Johnson. In 1868, he met Curry on one of Curry's trips into Washington. He wanted to come west, and Curry did bring him west. And he worked at the Mint for a number of years as a porter. Later, he worked for the Virginia and Truckee Railroad both as a baggage man and a porter. He died on February 13th, 1935. It was believed he was over 100 years of age. In September of 1870, Curry resigns, having served the shortest tenure of any of the 9 superintendents. He is now the unsuccessful candidate for the Republican nomination for Lieutenant Governor of Nevada. After that, he returned to private enterprise and dies of a stroke on October 19th, 1873. He's buried in Carson City. On January 22nd, 1979, a statue of Curry was dedicated in Carson City by Governor Robert List. And this is a quote from what the governor said that day. "It is only proper that Abraham Curry, a man who accomplished more in 15 years than most men hope to accomplish in a lifetime, be memorialized today in this manner." Curry is succeeded by Henry F. Rice. He's the second superintendent of the Mint, appointed in September of 1870 at a salary of $3,000. He had been the Wells Fargo agent at Carson City. He was an Ormsby County Commissioner on 2 different occasions, 1861 and 62, and again 1864 and 1871. He was the commissioner, one of the commissioners to establish the Mint, appointed along with Curry in December of 1865. He was a member of the Cornerstone Committee. In 1872, he borrowed obverse dies from the San Francisco Mint during the severe winter. Under peculiar circumstances, as no records, and supposedly the dies had not arrived from Philadelphia. The Coinage Act, and this is one of the few statistics we'll get into about quantities of coins. The Coinage Act, signed into law on February 12, 1873, and effective April 1st of that year, increased coinage weights. Before the effective date of the act, the Carson City Mint had created 2 great rarities. The 73 no arrows dime, 12,400 minted in early February, and the 73 no arrows quarter, 4,000 minted in mid-January. Survivors are now 1 dime in uncirculated condition. It was once owned by Rusty Go, who is sitting out here in the audience, and 5 quarters. He also owned one of those. There is much speculation as why these few pieces escaped the melting pot. There is a mystery which is almost unfathomable about a Winchester rifle box that supposedly contained 3,600 double eagles of inferior quality that were found in a vault, and Rice found them after he took over, supposedly left by Curry. The question is, how did $72,000 in face value gold not show up on the Mint's books? It's a very improbable story, but it's out there. He resigns under controversy in June of 1873. He again becomes the Wells Fargo agent. He's the president of the Board of Trustees of Carson City, which is akin to mayor under the charter that they had at that time in 1877. And he commits suicide in Stockton, California in November 1877. Rice is succeeded by Frank D. Hetrick. That's on July 1st, 1873. He's the assayer, had been the assayer at Philadelphia before arriving in Carson City, and he was the assayer and acting melter and refiner of the Mint in 1870. The Act of June 22nd, 1874 eliminated the branch designations for all of the mints, and Carson City becomes a full mint with all the other mints, and it's no longer the branch mint of the United States at Carson City, it's a United States Mint at Carson City. He resigns in 1874, having served just over a year. In April of 1872, he had married Lucy Ann Curry, the daughter of Abe Curry. The 4th superintendent was James Crawford. He is the longest serving superintendent of Carson City. He was appointed in September of 1874. He was born in Hardinsburg, Kentucky in 1835 and migrated to California in 1852, driving a team of oxen. He arrives in the Comstock in 1861 as a mill foreman. He was also a mill foreman at Dayton, which is just very close to hand to Virginia City. He was an assemblyman from Lyon County in the second session of 1866 and the sixth session of 1873. The number 2 coin press arrived there during his tenure. John Percival Jones was a United States Senator from Nevada. He served from 1873 to 1903. And he was a mining man and a former superintendent of the Crown Point Mill, which is in at Gold Hill in Story County. He introduced a bill to strike the ill-fated 20-cent piece. He convinced Congress that this was a coin desperately needed in the West, and it was approved in March of 1875. Business strikes were only made for 2 years at any of the mints, 75 and 76. Now on March 19, 1877, Dr. Linderman, the director of the mint, ordered Crawford to melt the entire 20-cent production of 10,000 coins. Today, there are the 20-cent pieces are perhaps no more than 2 dozen known to have escaped. 17 are slab, 15 are unks. Maryland hoard of the 1950s is believed to have had 8 or 10 pieces. And supposedly, John J. Ford acquired 4 of them, and Q. David Bowers acquired another 4. In 1876, there were allegations that Carson City was producing underweight trade dollars, resulting in a loss of $20,000 per million coins. And there were calls to close the mint again, dismissed as unfounded by Linderman and Secretary Lot Morrell. In 1876, Congressman William Woodburn of Nevada introduces a $200,000 appropriation bill to enlarge the mint, but that bill is defeated. Joseph Breck Harmstead has had a career in the mint service that took him from the Philadelphia Mint to New Orleans, San Francisco, to Carson City, and back to San Francisco, which was his last job in the mint service. He was a machinist in Carson City from 1876 to December of 1881, and he died in 1889 at Portland, Oregon, 75 years of age. And there's a book that just came out, and it's mentioned in the handout that you have or can obtain, which is about Joseph Harmstead. Director Linderman comes to Carson City in 1877 and found the mint to have the lowest available allowable waste amongst all mints. He pronounced the Carson City Mint to be an excellent facility and then ordered the layoff of 15 female employees. Crawford hires them back and lays off 15 males. Today you'd get sued in a pair of New York seconds into pulling that trick. The Bland-Allison Act was passed in on February 28th of 1878, and it was authored by Richard P. Bland, representative from Missouri, and Senator William B. Allison of Iowa. And the act gave birth to the Bland dollar, which we now, of course, know as the Morgan dollar. Richard Bland, at the age of 25, began his political career in what is now Nevada when he was elected the treasurer of Carson County, Utah Territory, August 6, 1860. This was a vast area of over 20,000 square miles with an estimated population of 6,900. Bland served until the organization of the original 9 counties in November of 1861. He practiced law in Virginia City. Returning to Missouri in 1865, he's elected to the 43rd Congress in 1873 and serves 13 non-consecutive terms. Bland sought the Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States in 1896. And today one might speculate what would have happened to the Carson City Mint had Bland become the president. He certainly must have had better feelings about Nevada than some of the other people that got into control of the federal bureaucracy and the presidency, for that matter. May 23rd, 1878, the arch on the Carson City #1 coin press breaks, and it's repaired at the V&T shops. The Virginia and Truckee Railway had a large shop, one of several large shops, in fact, in Nevada, and they were able to fix the Morgan and Orr press. They were proud of their work, and they took the Morgan and Orr plate off of it, put a Virginia and Truckee plate on it, which gave rise to another fable that a lot of people believe that the press was built in Carson City. It was not. It was built in Pennsylvania and shipped out. In 1881, the second floor of the refinery is completed. Grover Cleveland is a strong anti-silver man, and he's elected president in 1884 and takes office March 4th, 1885. 4 days later, March 8th, 1885, Crawford dies of heart disease. 10 years in office, the longest of any superintendent Carson City superintendent. Theodore Hofer becomes the acting superintendent for 3 weeks. In a knee-jerk operation or knee-jerk reaction to Crawford's death, on March 19, 1885, the mint is ordered closed for a year. It actually will stay closed several years, and there are no coins struck in 1886, 87, or 88. William Garrett, 5th superintendent, was appointed on April 1st, 1885. He's a former major. He was also the warden of the Nevada State Prison from 79 to 80. He was the secretary to Governor Jewett Adams, who will later himself become a superintendent of the mint. Upon the appointment as superintendent by the new Cleveland administration, he immediately begins the termination of 80 employees. And at the end of 1885, only Garrett and one other employee are left on the payroll. $6 million in gold and silver in the mint vaults, and 80% of the Morgan dollars minted at Carson City between 82 and 85 are moved east on treasure trains. These dollars later show up in the GSA sales. In 1886, October of 1886, he is ordered to reopen the mint for assaying and receipt of bullion only, no coining operations. Garrett is the first of 3 superintendents never to have struck a coin at the Carson City Mint. On June 30th, 1889, Garrett is removed as superintendent. The facility is in disrepair. James Kimball, who was the director of the mint, is also removed, and he was also an enemy of Carson City. Samuel Coleman Wright was the 6th superintendent. He was appointed on July 1st, 1889 by William Wyndham, who is now Secretary of Treasury under Benjamin Harrison, who has just defeated Grover Cleveland. Wright has got a curious background, or curious occupations. He's an attorney and a judge, which goes hand in hand, but he's also an undertaker. He's a member of the 1866 Cornerstone Committee. The coining machinery is not working until September of 1889. And then beginning in October, there's only 2 denominations struck, dollars and double eagles. And it's one of two denomination years out of the Carson City Mint. On August 1st, in 92, he suddenly dies at age 61. Theodore Hofer, 7th superintendent of the mint, is appointed on August 6, 1892. He began his career as a messenger in 1869 and rises through the ranks to become chief clerk of the mint. He serves as acting superintendent in March 1885 after Crawford died. Although there were other brief periods when the superintendency was vacant, Hofer was the only person to serve by appointment as acting superintendent. While employed at the mint, he also serves as the cashier of the Bullion and Exchange Bank of Carson City, a curious arrangement with Hofer conducting bank business out of the mint. Hofer was the last superintendent to actually strike coins in Carson City. He's the 7th. There's 2 more superintendents coming, but neither one of those will strike coins. On March 4th, 1893, the Cleveland administration and the anti-Carson City Mint faction are back in business. And on June 1st, 1893, coinage production is suspended, never to resume. In 23 years of operation, including several significant shutdowns, the mint has produced 56,600,000 odd coins, and at the face value of $49.2 million. May 1894, virtually all remaining employees are required to resign. Only enough remain to do the annual cleanup. Hofer, a former Republican turned Silver Partyist, resigns March 20th, 1894, and becomes the state bank examiner. He's involved in Tonopah mining in later years with Roswell Coal Cord as vice president and Hofer as secretary. They are involved in the Nevada Creamery Company. Jewett William Adams, 8th superintendent, is appointed June 1st, 1894. He was born in Vermont in August of 1835. He migrated to California in the early 1850s and engaged in mining. He operated a general store in Mariposa County, California from 57 to 60, and he was the paymaster of the Fremont estate from 60 to 64. He arrived on the Comstock in 1864 and associated himself with Mackey and Fair and had freighting business and mining interests. He was a Democrat, Lieutenant Governor of Nevada, 1875 to 83, and the 4th Governor of Nevada, 83 to 87. He was the unsuccessful candidate for a second term, and he lost by 594 votes. February 19th, 1895, there's a theft of over $75,000 reported by melter and refiner Hirsch Harris to Adams. One bar from the Standard Mine at Bodie was missing, and another stamp, $21,000, had been sweated and was worth $1,000. Adams notified R.E. Preston, the director of the mint. He sent Andrew Mason, superintendent of the U.S. Assay Office at New York, to investigate. Mason found altered records, missing pages from record books, and a variety of falsifications. He assayed every bar at the mint. Arrested, prosecuted, and convicted are John T. Jones, assistant melter and refiner, James H. Heaney, silver dissolver, and Henry Piper, refinery worker. Arrested but not prosecuted due to uncooperative witnesses, William J. Pickler, a former melter. Some of the most prominent names in Nevada, the Nevada legal profession, were involved in this case, including defense attorneys Trenmore Coffin, who later became a renowned prosecutor, and William Woodburn, an ex-three-term congressman who in 1876 had authored the ill-fated bill to provide $200,000 to enlarge the mint. In 1901, William Woodburn becomes the Attorney General of Nevada. April 18th, 1895, all operations are ordered suspended. In September of 1898, Adams resigns as superintendent. He becomes a stockman, moves to this city, San Francisco, and dies here June 18th, 1920. Roswell Keyes Colcord, ninth and last superintendent of the mint, is appointed in 1898, September 1898. And he's born in Seaport, Maine, April 25th, 1839. He's a gold miner in Tuolumne County, California in 1856, and by 1863, he's at Aurora, Nevada. He's a mining engineer on the Comstock. He is a Republican, 7th governor of Nevada. He served from 1861 to 95 and did not seek a second term. As superintendent, he makes the final attempt to save the mint. Congressman Francis G. Newlands, of Water Project fame, makes a miscalculation. He attaches a rider to an appropriation bill giving the Secretary of the Treasury authorization to either keep Carson City Mint as a mint or reduce it to an assay office. Upon passage, the Secretary immediately makes Carson City an assay office. As superintendent, he closes the facility June 30th, 1899, and he becomes the first assayer in charge July 1st, 1899. Reminiscent of the treasure trains that had gone out of Carson City in 1885, $5 million in silver dollars were shipped east. The last boxcar contained $800,000 in silver. There were no coins left at the mint. In 1899, September, all the minting machinery is dismantled and transferred to other mints. Coin press number 1 eventually finds its way to the San Francisco Mint and is there renumbered number 5. In 1907, there are 7 employees. The bullion production from new strikes in Goldfield and Tonopah keep the assay office going. Colcord retires June 30th, 1911, after 13 years at the mint. He has fought hard to keep the facility open and to secure annual appropriations. He was the oldest living ex-governor in the United States when he died October 30th, 1939, 6 months past his 100th birthday. It was on the eve of Nevada's 75th anniversary and 2 years, 1 day before the Carson City Mint would become the Nevada State Museum. Andrew Mott. He's the second assayer in charge at Carson City and appointed July 1911. He is a silver Democrat, a former senator from Nye County, having served twice in the legislature, and he was the elected state printer. And at a time when the state printing office or the state printer was elected, he served from 1899 to 1906. And he retired as the assayer in charge in 1921, dies in 1926 at age 82. Annie Hudnall Martin, third assayer in charge. She was appointed in 1921. She had been employed by Abraham Curry in 1870. She left the mint to become a teacher, and she taught for 13 years. Then she owned the Carson City Daily News, or Carson City Daily Morning News. And eventually she came back to the mint in 1908 as clerk in the assay office. Actually, now it's not a mint, it's the assay office. She comes back there and works for Roswell Colcord. She becomes the chief clerk from 1913 to 1921. When she was appointed assayer in charge, she became the first woman in charge of any bureau of the mint facility ever. And we think now today of Henrietta Holzman IV, we think of Eva Adams, and other women that have held top positions. She was the first one, if you want to talk about the glass ceiling, to get that far. Times were not good in Carson City, and she only had 3 employees. The Pittman Act caused increased activity, but $270 million Morgan dollars as a product, or was the product of the Pittman Act, were minted elsewhere. She remains the assayer in charge until her death, February 19th, 1928. For over 40 years, she was the organist at the First Presbyterian Church. She should not be confused, though, with Anne Henrietta Martin, an independent candidate for U.S. Senate in 1918 and 1920. In researching Annie Hudnall Martin, and I'm sure Rusty will probably, because of his research, and maybe Fred also because of research he's done, start running across A.H. Martin in records, and it's very difficult to sift out which Martin we're talking about. Is Anne Henrietta, who's the candidate, or Annie Hudnall, who is the assayer in charge? Last assayer in charge, fourth and last assayer, is Albert T. Clyde. He's appointed in February 1928, and he also is a publisher, former publisher of the Carson Daily Morning News. In the final years, there's nothing going on at the assay office to speak of, and as the last assayer in charge, he closes the place up June 30th, 1933, and on July 1st, 1933, the facility passes from the Department of the Treasury to the General Services Administration. Basically, it's surplus property, and the government wishes to get rid of it. 1938, this is the beginning of the change towards the State Museum now. In 1938, the little coin factory at 600 North Carson Street is pretty forlorn. Roof is desperately in need of repair. Weeds grow on the ground. It appears that this dilapidated building with little or no future and probably little or no time left before demolition. A for sale sign went up on the building in 1938. The treasure of Nevada in the West is now nothing more than surplus property priced at $5,000. District Judge Clark J. Gill began his virtual one-man campaign to save the mint, and he enlists the services or the aid of Patrick McCarran, who was an extremely powerful United States Senator and the former Chief Justice. McCarran is able to shepherd this through, that Nevada will buy the building, and in 1939, the legislature, state legislature, appropriates $5,000 to purchase the building. And then McCarran is able to finish this off, and Nevada acquires the building in 1939, or December of 1939. There were no funds to repair the building. Money came, or all kinds of support came from a variety of different sources, and money in particular. $5,000 was raised by Service Club, children, societies, and citizens. $17,000 was donated by Major Max Flashman of Flashman Yeast fame, and a copper roof at $40,000, or valued at $40,000, was provided by several Nevada mining companies. On October 31st, 1941, Nevada Day, the 77th anniversary of statehood, the old mint is dedicated as the Nevada State Museum. 1958, coin press number 1, now renumbered number 5 here in San Francisco, returns to Carson City. It was on loan between 64 and 67 to the federal government at the request of Miss Eva Adams, who was the director of the mint and a native of Wonder, Nevada. Wonder, Nevada is a little ghost town out in the middle of nowhere, and kind of an interesting little place. It was used at the Denver Mint during the coin shortage, and it is now on display at the museum and has been used to strike numerous commemorative medals since then. The first ones actually that were struck were the Nevada Bicentennial medals were struck there, and then from that we went on with a great host of medals that are being struck there even today. Clark J. Guild, born in 1887 in Dayton, Nevada. He attended the University of Nevada. He was elected auditor and recorder of Lyon County at the age of 21, and he serves 8 years. He read law and was admitted to the bar in 1914 and became district attorney of Lyon County, and he serves 8 years in that capacity. In 1925, he becomes the district judge, and he retires in 1953, having served as an elected public office for 44 years. He becomes the chairman of the board of the Nevada State Museum in 1939 and serves until 1971. He is also the general curator from 52 to 71. In his 62 years of after 62 years of public service, he dies in Carson City in 1971. And those of you that have been in the museum, the Clark J. Guild Hall, which is a more recent addition, is named in his honor. Obscure collectors. When we think of famous collectors that have built the great collections of coins, not just Carson City coins, but those that include Carson City coins, we think of Louis Elias Berg, Ambassador and Mrs. Henry Norweb, Reed Hahn, Waldo Bolin, Almond Carter Jr., and E.A. Carson. Those immediately come to mind. But of course there were others, and we're going to mention a couple of them here now. These are two of the foremost collectors. Harold M. Budd was born in 1886 in Meriden, Connecticut, and he attended Yale, engaged in the wholesale textiles business in Los Angeles. He's described as the finest little guy who ever lived. Carson City coins first attracted him to numismatics, and he built an almost complete Carson City collection. He often visited the Nevada State Museum during the formative years and loaned Carson City coins to the museum for display. 2 months before his death, he purchased the 1876 20-cent piece in the Monjou sale, August 1950. He and a friend are en route to Carson City with coins to display at the museum. Outside Bridgeport, California, they come upon a wreck. There was an overturned car and a man laying in the road who was dead. They stopped to render assistance. A second man from the overturned car, armed with a handgun, steals their car and takes off, leaving them out there. While reporting the crime to the sheriff of Mono County, Bud suffers a heart attack. He dies August 8, 1950 at Carson City. His vehicle is later recovered in Sonora, California with the coins intact in the trunk. Norman Bills. Norman Bills was a personality that was around Nevada, certainly when I got there, and kind of a flamboyant sort of guy. He was born in 1902 in Connecticut. At 25, he arrives in Nevada and engages in the real estate profession. He promoted Nevada as the last frontier and got millionaires to relocate to and invest in Nevada. He himself becomes a millionaire. He marries Esther Auchincloss Nash, a divorcee, the aunt of Jackie Bouvier, the future Mrs. JFK. He's a Republican, but he's a behind-the-scenes political operative. He supports Senator Pat McCarran, Democrat. At the same time, he's supporting Governor Charles Russell, Republican, and in 1960, he's very active in the Kennedy campaign. He's involved in the Nevada State Museum and serves 2 years on the board. He probably started collecting Carson City coins in the early 1960s, although there's some evidence that this may have occurred sometime previous. He purchased coins through agents. His name was not well known to anybody as having coins. He builds an almost complete collection of CC coins, 109 pieces, by 1971, missing only 2 pieces, the unique 73 CC no arrows dime and an excessively rare 73 CC no arrows quarter. In 1971, he sells the collection to the Old First National Bank of Nevada. The price is $50,000, far less than its true value. Jack Berry, a prominent Reno attorney, coin collector, and member of the 1967 Assay Commission, and longtime friend of Eva Adams, prepares the agreement. Stipulations. The bank will never sell the collection will never leave the state of Nevada, and the collection must be displayed on a regular basis. The bank was far less faithful to the latter clause than the first two. For several years, the collection was never seen in public. In 1989, it went on display in a vault at the museum. In failing health and severe pain, he dies July 3, 1973, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Later, through bank mergers, the collection passes to First Interstate Bank and then to Wells Fargo. After more than 10 years on loan, it passes to the state of Nevada as a gift from Wells Fargo, December 8, 1999. Now, until recently, that collection has been in a rather elaborate, I kind of think of it as an oversized capital plastic holder of this giant thing hanging inside a vault. And all 109 coins were there. And then on August 28th, 2004, for the first time in history, there are specimens of all 111 Carson City coins on display in the museum at the same time when Rusty Go displays the missing dime and the missing quarters of the two great rarities. And they're part of the day. And that concludes who these people are, and I would entertain questions. Yes, Don.
What about Laverne Redfield?
Redfield is more, or not is, was more of a hoarder. He had bags of coins that he dumped down a coal chute, all kinds of strange things because he was evading taxes. If you know the background, he was the subject of an IRS investigation, and the government took a real interest in Laverne Redfield. He used to drive an old beat-up pickup truck. He dressed like a bum so people didn't think he had any money. And he was a cash operator, and he had a basement full of silver dollars. There was a guy that I knew years and years ago. I'm not sure whether he's even still living. His name was Don Weaver. Don Weaver was the Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal for Nevada, and he helped, with a number of other people, gather up the coins out of the basement, and the conditions they were kept under were far less than satisfactory. So there are people you can say, well, some guy went down or whatever and was buying up rolls of Carson City dollars or silver dollars or whatever. That doesn't make him a collector per se. I'm looking at people that were, should we say, connoisseurs. Bud was certainly a connoisseur, I think, and I think from what we know about Bill's in upgrading, supposedly he looked at 1,089 CC dollars to find one that he liked. Supposedly. Whether that story is true or not, I'm not sure. I saw a hand, so, oh, okay, sir.
What kind of progress are they making on restoring the Virginia and Truckee Railroad?
Well, I think they're making good progress. They've acquired right-of-way, and they're raising money, their grants and so forth, and I don't know whether in our lifetime, whether it's going to run the full length from Virginia City back to Carson City, but there's a good possibility, and some of it's already, in fact, some of it's been operating for years in Virginia City, and now they're coming down, will come down ultimately through the canyon.
How far south are they going to come?
Well, how far are they going to? They would like to go right into Carson City. Money and, whatever prevailing. Unfortunately, in 1950, when the last train ran, they were running, and had for several years, they were running mixed trains, and that meant it was a baggage car, a passenger car, and whatever freight cars were necessary. In fact, Lucius Beebe entitled one of his books "Mixed Train Daily" because that's all it was. It was in the dying throes, and they tore up all, they sold everything off to movie studios, whatever. Ripped up the tracks, got rid of the right-of-way, and now they're having to pay, in some cases, some pretty prime prices. Rusty?
Hal, just as a side note too, on the Virginia Truckee Railroad, last week, before we all left to come down here, they'd already laid 1.3 miles of track, and they purchased the locomotive. They purchased a locomotive that wasn't from one of the Nevada trains, but from out of state. They purchased one for $450,000. They've got that ready, and the last I heard, they have like a target date of maybe 2008, 2009 of having a full run.
Yeah. There is a lot of support in the state, even people that are not railroad buffs. This is another real treasure. Unfortunately, we lost that treasure, and now we're trying to get it back, whereas the museum, or the mint, we didn't lose that treasure, thanks to Judge Guild. The story is that Judge Guild was walking down the street one day and a for sale sign was on the building, and we have a picture of the building with a for sale sign on it. And he was appalled, and this is what began this process with the judge contacting Senator McCarran, who they had known each other forever, and McCarran at the time was an extremely powerful senator and got things moving. Otherwise, had it from Guild, had it not been perhaps for Pat McCarran, it'd be another parking lot or office building or something in Carson City.
How much restoration did they have to do to that building once they got a hold of it? Was there a lot? A great deal?
It needed a new roof, $40,000 copper roof, and needed a lot of work. It had not been taken care of as it should have been. Because after it closed as an assay office, it stood vacant. I mean, there wasn't even anybody doing anything. Then in, I think it was 91 or 92, they had to retrofit it to bring it up to seismic standards. And it was closed for about a year, I think. And they did a lot of work in there.
What I'm getting at is if it needed a roof, did they also have to repair the floors and the walls from water coming?
I'm sure that there was a lot of it done. There's pictures of workmen. Now, whether they're repairing because it was unsound or whether they're just refurbishing it so it's presentable in 1939, I'm not sure.
I would guess, if the roof really
You had to have water damage inside, you'd think, yeah.
Rain coming in and
Oh, sure.
dry rot and had to replace
Sure.
the wood and everything.
What was the employment at its peak? How many men employees were there?
I'm not sure. I think there was over 100. Is that correct, Rusty? Yeah, right at 100, yeah.
And were the superintendent's offices in the mint as well?
Oh, yeah, all the whole operation was inside that building, yeah.
Very small building, really.
Well, that's true. Just, Fred.
You mentioned that construction dragged in the beginning in '66 until its completion, and that Curry retired from his office in 1870. Was he in office when the first coins were struck? And if so, where's the first coin struck at the Carson City Mint today?
Well, he was in office because he was appointed superintendent in 1860, at the end of 1869, and he remained there until his unsuccessful bid for lieutenant governor in 1870, so he was there up until September, and the first coin was struck in February, so yes, he was there. That part we know. Where the first coin is, that is the first physical coin, or any of them for that matter, out of the 2,300, that would be speculative. Supposedly it was sent to President Grant, and he may or may not have actually struck it. And where that coin is today, I'm not sure.
Any ideas, Rusty?
Well, they have, there's no actual letter that you can produce that says, hey, Ulysses S. Grant, here's a silver dollar for you from A. Curry. But from all indications, he made that promise ahead of time. He said the very first silver dollar that struck on this press here is going to the president. It was in the paper and everything. And, Curry was a man with a big ego and everything. And so he would have been held to that promise and he would have wanted to do it. And, I can't say it was stack of Bibles that Grant got, but I've always considered that he probably did. Earlier on in 1868, when they were building it, Curry had originally said, I'm going to send the first $20 gold piece to the president right after Grant was elected, but then he modified that. A year later, it said the first silver dollar. And so I would think that he did. And then, of course, Curry was known to give those silver dollars out to his friends, too. Gave them out to Hal V.
What year would that have on it? That silver?
1870.
1870.
The 1870 is the most common of the Liberty-seeded Carson dollars. There's only 4 years, 70, 71, 2, and 3. And it's certainly, when I say the most common, don't read into that it's common, but if you look at that particular series, it's the most available. Yes, sir?
Did Abram Curry live in the mint?
No.
An apartment in the mint?
No, he lived 2 blocks back of the Mint on North Nevada Street. The house still stands today. It's gone through, I don't know how many different owners. The Burning family owned it for many, many years. And it's built out of the same material as the Mint, though.
Hal, maybe Rusty, you or Fred can answer this, or anybody else here. Is there any photo documentation of ingots or raw gold or silver being transferred from the B&T depot, which is now the Carson One Masonic Lodge, kind of catty corner across the street from the Mint, to the Mint? Is there any documentation of that ever happening in
I have not seen it, but maybe Rusty or Fred can.
Done by wagon or cart.
So you're saying when the bullion came down from the
Correct.
stock and unloaded there at the depot where the Masonic Lodge is now?
Or when it was shipped back from a processing mill and ended up, we assume, at the
Well,
depot.
there's a picture of, I don't know how many it is, but they're large 1,000-ounce bars, and under the caption, it says, these have just been transported from the V&T Railroad, apparently transferred from the V&T Railroad to, on the Carson City.
So that's only about 100 yards maybe. How was that done? Any documentation?
Well, they have an oxen cart. They have an oxen cart that they loaded on, and then they have a ramp that led up to the back of the oxen cart
And where in the mint did they store their working
in the
materials?
basement. Sometimes they stored it right in the front foyer.
I would actually think that that's potentially an really interesting question.
It is, yeah.
And arguable, and the reason is, if a company had shipped their bullion to the mint via Wells Fargo and Company, and insured it via Wells Fargo and Company, and V&T was the carrier, Wells Fargo would have made sure it made it from the V&T station to the doors, to the door of the
Fargo was
mint,
in charge of it.
because otherwise it's uninsured.
Yeah,
So.
no, it wasn't just a couple of local boys.
So I don't, in answer to the back to the local deal, I really don't, I don't know if there is a photographic record of stamp, because the stuff would have been in treasure boxes or in boxes going from the rail station to the mint, and wouldn't have been opened, or the seals wouldn't have been broken until they got inside the mint. And they're not gonna show off the stuff outside the front door, because it's too dangerous, too much at risk. And I'm just thinking out loud with all of you here.
I have a couple of receipts from or Wells Fargo receipts to mining companies that show the destination being the mint.
That's true, in which
Yeah.
case it's insured, so they're gonna take it from the train station no matter what.
Right.
To the mint, because they don't want it out of their
Oh,
control.
absolutely.
But on the other side of the coin, which Rusty brought up, was if somebody had privately taken something, I don't know of any real photographic record. What Rusty's referring to in those photographs are very clearly braggadocio of the mines. Here's a pile of many 1,000-ounce plus ingots going to the mint. Yes, but we actually don't know what stage at which they're taking those photographs.
That's correct. Yeah.
And how they're getting
Yeah,
it.
they were
Yeah.
just sort of standing out in front of the building there. There's a picture of it in my book.
There's quite a few, actually. There's a whole, lots of them.
There was a gentleman in back, and then
I get the feeling that you, Rusty, and Fred are like the experts in Carson City. I mean, is that kind of?
no, he is. I'm not. Fred is. I'm not.
He's crazy, he is too.
I mean, this is like the best information on the Carson City Mint, you three, I mean.
Yeah, Hal is the pioneer. He arrived in Carson City probably before Fred and I were.
I was sheriff of Carson City for a number of years. And I
You
first
arrived in
met-
Carson City in the late 19th.
I got there in '58.
So,
Yeah.
I was just a little bit out of diapers. I don't know about you, Fred.
fair ways, but, yeah, no, I met Hal in his office in Carson City.
That's 100 years ago. You're giving our age away.
Yeah, but Fred, you, Rusty, and Hal haven't aged.
Well, and then there's one other gentleman, which there's one other gentleman that's was a real pioneer in researching the history of the mint, and that goes back over 30 years ago. And his name is Howard Hickson, and he was at the time that he was doing this, he was the curator at the museum, and was given the assignment to write a book on the history, and that's called Mint Mark CC, and that's mentioned in the handout also. And Howard left the museum many, many years ago. That museum went to the Northeastern Nevada Museum. So he certainly did a lot of pioneer research work that just nobody knew anything about. Yes, sir.
When these silver bars were delivered to the mint, were they parted, or did they have to be refined once they got there?
No, they had to refine them. There was a refinery in the mint. It was on the back end of the mint, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they'd resmelt it and everything?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Ken over here, Ken Hopple, is also, probably knows more about the coin press than anybody I've ever talked to, about how it works. He keeps it running, and you know, this is not something that you call up the manufacturer and say, I just broke a whatever piece, put one on the, yeah, put one on the plane for me, yeah.
Sorry, that was the official heckle.
Okay.